Oh, hey folks, welcome back to KEI Fabrication. Oh no, what have I done? Alright folks, what we got going on here is a fixture to help get my steering arms accurate. So what I did, I got all that time and effort into making the passenger side steering arm correct with the bump steer, camber, and caster, and toe out on turns and all that stuff. Now I have to make the other side because, I cut the other spindle all into little pieces. How do you get it to match? Well, the answer is build a fixture. So what I've got is the pin from an old tie rod that I cut out, and that's welded to a bracket that is positioned by the fixture that holds the steering arm. And when you're doing a mirror image, you have to duplicate from one side to the other. So when this is bolted to the other side, it'll position this correctly over there, and then this will be my target for this, and then I just kind of have to fill in the gaps. But when it's all said and done, if my fixture is built correctly, I shouldn't even have to check the driver's side as far as the steering geometry, because my Ackerman and my bump steer, because of the height of the tie rod end, is all going to be exact, or at least exact as my fixture positions it. So I got to wait for this to cool down. I'm going to disassemble it, move it over to the other side of my fixture, and then I'll start adjusting the piece that goes in between the tie rod end receiver and the steering arm that bolts to the spindle. And I'll also utilize that to tack this into position as well. So the only way to do this correctly is with a fixture. So I had to put the time in to build this. I was kind of dreading it because I wasn't sure how I was going to go about it. Sometimes you have to walk away from it for a while, think about it, and then come back and do it. So this is what I come up with. If I crash the truck or whatever, or even if I want to make some spares to take with me on any of our road trips, this is how I'm going to make sure that without having to check anything, it'll be exact to what I have determined based on the geometry that I've tested and experimented with on the truck. Alright, so let's this cool down. I'm going to start putting the other steering arm together. Alright, I got it all tacked together. Now I can take it out of the fixture. Kind of worked out nice because I have this little window right here to get my TIG torch in. Same thing on the back side. I tack the steering arm diagonally. One's down low, one's up high. Now I can get rid of this so it's completely out of the way and do the final welding. Alright folks, we got it all welded up. Actually both of them are all welded up now. The other one must have hit the floor. Alright, so there's the finished product. Now, you know, you might think that it's insane to cut apart a steering arm and weld it back together. I've done this with MIG welds and everything else way back in the day. But this was V'd out, and there are a root pass and then several filleting passes in all the connections, and you know, there's several layers of weld to build it up. So what I'm going to do, I wanted to show you the welds before I smoothed them out with a grinder. What I'm going to do is touch them up with a flapper disc to get rid of some of the, when I turned the corners I overlapped to make sure that I'm getting full penetration all the way in. So I'll dress them up a little bit and blow some paint on them, and then I got one more modification to do to these, and I'll show you what that is in a minute. Alright folks, that one final modification that I need to do is, this is the stock Mazda tie rod end, and you can see that it goes on just fine, and the cotter pin does what it's supposed to do in terms of lining up and depth of engagement. However, we got away from the factory Mazda tie rod end and we went to the Ford Mustang II rack, and you can see that we're missing the keyway by about 1/2 to 3/4 the diameter of the hole for the keyway. Well, how do you fix that? Well, it requires a special tool. This is the old rabbit hole syndrome, right? This is from Speedway Motors, and this is a tapered ream, and this tapered ream is a 7.15 taper, and that is consistent with the tapers that are in automotive tie rod end and some ball joints. You have to order the correct one to get the depth of engagement. The tie rod end ones are the smallest, and the ball joint ones go up to the larger, depending on the vehicle you're working on. So the deal is that I need to figure out how deep I need to go and mark this and set my drill press up. So I'm only going to increase the depth of engagement of this taper enough to get the cotter key in, and what that'll mean is that the end of the taper is fully engaged with the receiver on the steering arm. Alright, I hit it with the tapered reamer, and I've got room for the cotter key. So these are 100% ready to bolt on. Alright gang, what's in the box? Just got this delivered from Speedway Engineering, and yes, I did open it up when it got here because the box was pretty beat up. However, what was inside was in perfect condition. Alright, so I ordered these on a recommendation from a fellow Mazda LS swap guy, Mazda B2200, named Reese. Thank you very much for the suggestion. He had already done his swap, and these are Speed Engineering S10 headers, and Reese had indicated that they were a direct fit. So I already have headers on mine, but if you watched my channel from the beginning when I first started this LS swap, I ordered Camaro headers, and I didn't know anybody that had done an LS swap of the B2200. I was kind of figuring it out all myself, and I literally just looked at pictures and I said, well, the Camaro ones look like they'll work. Well, they did, but as you saw, I had to modify one of the tubes to clear the steering shaft, and Reese had indicated that when he did his, he ordered the S10 headers and the steering shaft cleared by a mile. So I want to make it clear that for direct bolt-on without modification of your steering shaft, the Speed Engineering S10 headers are a direct fit. So very nice headers. They're welded inside and out. Stainless steel, 3/8 thick flanges. Now what I like about these is they come with the collector. It already has the O2 bung, and it's a V-band collector. One of the things that I dislike the most about headers is that 3-bolt flange and the gaskets associated with them. I always have them in stock because they always leak over time. So this is no longer a problem with these. So I'm psyched about that. Now, you might be thinking, why did you buy another set of headers if you already made the ones you have work? Well, let me show you what I'm faced with here. Alright, so what I'm trying to portray here is the header that's currently on the Mazda is the Camaro header. And what I want to try to show you is the tube that is immediately next to the steering shaft is going to the outside of the header, and the header kind of stays outboard of the engine. So that crowds the steering shaft pretty bad. Now, as it turns out, when I'm trying to connect my new steering shaft to the rack and pinion, I need even more clearance. So the only way to resolve that is spend the money that I should have spent on the first try, but hey, I didn't know, and everything is trial and error, right? So this is the steering shaft here, and it's almost perfect, but I'm touching the header tube, and I need to go inboard just a slight bit more to make this work. It's already connected to the rack. The angles are good. I've got the right number of universal joints. However, if I move this inboard just a little bit more, the angle of my next universal joint actually gets better. Even though this is acceptable, it gets better if I move it in. Plus, I'm going to gain a little more room for my upper control arms to be serviced and do the alignment. So this is like the last thing I need to do to connect the steering shaft to the rack. As you saw a little earlier, I got my steering arms done. So the rack and pinion is in its final location, and I'm almost ready to put this thing together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this header off and put the new header on. I'll show you the results between basically a before and after. So I'll leave everything. I'll give you what that looks like now, and hopefully I can do and show with the other headers what it looks like later. Out with the old. At least I thought I was coming out. In with the new. Look at the miles of room there. There's over 2 inches of room there. So this is kind of encouraging, folks. Many of you have asked for motor mounts from me, and I've held off producing those is because I prolonged buying the headers, and I didn't really understand that I absolutely needed to do so because of now that I've changed to a rack and pinion. I needed the additional clearance, and thanks to Reese already have done in this. I'll post some pictures of his truck, but what I've done is I've confirmed that my motor mounts will work with these headers. So throughout the community now, what ends up happening is we're piecing together almost a direct fit set of components. So now what I can do is I can firm up the production requirements for the motor mounts and hopefully set you folks up with those as well. Alright folks, these are spacers to go between the steering column bracket in the dash and the steering column itself. I'm dropping it down 13/16 of an inch. I need to get this in position to finalize the location of the steering shaft to connect the steering shaft to the rack, because any little difference in the steering column height is going to make a significant difference in the angle and position of the universal joints connecting one to the other. So I'm going to go throw these in place, and then we're going to work on finalizing the steering column. Alright, this is step one, getting the steering column connected. These have engagement way inside. This is 3/16 wall DOM tubing, so it's super strong, and I rosette welded the shaft to that, so I'm not only relying on just this fillet weld here on both ends. So that's done, one step closer. Alright, once again I used some cardboard aided design. You saw me cut the bracket out on the bandsaw, tune it up, and there it is. And this, for the first time in a real long time, probably 10 months, the steering shaft is actually connected to the rack. And man, the universal joints are all phased, and even though it's not connected to the steering, that would actually be better to find a bind, but everything is working great. And the reason why there's a bearing support necessary on the drive shaft is I'm using more than 2 universals. So if I didn't do that, the torque would encourage that shaft to swing all over the place. So it was a tight squeeze. I've got clearance for my bolts to do the alignment, and this is removable. So if I ever have to disassemble the steering column, the rod end will come out without a problem. So it's just kind of tacked in place, but obviously you gotta build confidence in your design. So I'm pretty psyched. This is a big accomplishment, and I could have never done this if I didn't buy those Speed Engineering headers and give me the extra room I needed. I needed probably another 5 degrees rotated towards the engine. And these headers gave me like 1.5 inches, and I used at least half of that amount of room. So plus they gave me plenty of room for the universal down low and the heim joint, that's my bearing support. Alright gang, this is something that hasn't happened in like 10 months. I'm excited. Is that cool or what?